I wanted to talk about writing at different stages of your life and how that can impact your writing. I guess that's not... I got a phone call the last time I tried to make this video and now I'm starting over and I'm thoroughly confused about where I'm going with this. It's fine, I'll figure it out. Yeah, I wanted to talk about like how your life kind of impacts your writing, but also why it is that sometimes people just never finish book series. And I think what is quite surprising for a lot of people to find out is that it's not necessarily anything to do with not liking the book anymore or not having the funds to do it. I mean, obviously these things can impact, but I do think that sometimes it's a thing, like people assume that, oh, you just don't like the books anymore, or there's not enough money to be able to fund it, no publisher wants it, or you can't be bothered self-publishing it anymore, or whatever, the publication thing's not coming together, or like there's some actual logistical reason, or like a lack of interest reason that this thing isn't happening. And I think from a reader perspective it's very easy to see it like that, and from a writer perspective it's very easy to feel quite guilty about wanting to kind of move on from something, or not even necessarily wanting to, having this deep and ingrained desire to continue doing what it is that you're doing, and the book that it is, the book series that it is that you're writing, or the individual book that you are writing, and then you feel quite guilty when that just doesn't seem to be possible and you can't figure out why. Disclaimer, this is not advice. For a start. And number 2 is I'm a mood writer. I write what I feel like writing. I write what I'm in the mood to write, and obviously that makes me even more susceptible to the thing that I'm about to explain to you, which is life stages impacting your writing. Well, not life stages, that's still not what I mean, but it's the best word I have so far. So what do I mean? Also, I apologise for if you think I look a mess. I am a mess. My boiler broke this week. It's been literal chaos. Actually, that's not even true. My boiler broke on my wedding anniversary. On my 5-year wedding anniversary, what I got was a surprisingly cold shower and to have to phone the boiler people. Speaking of 5/10 year anniversary, 5-year wedding, 10 years together anniversary, I wrote this book, Welcome to Humanity, for my wife for our 5/10 year anniversary. It is a sci-fi dystopian novel, and if you read it, you might be thinking, Will, do you really love your wife though? Because this is a really like heavy book. It's a short one, but it's mentally and emotionally quite heavy. If you're looking for something a bit more lightweight, might interest you, in Mary Ellen Breaking the Curse or Mary Ellen Finding the Air, these are 2 books that I also have that are less heavy. I'm thinking of changing my tagline to, I'll make you laugh, I'll make you cry, I'll make you say, Will, why would you do this to me? But I don't know, let me know what you think of that. Anyway, back to the point of the video, which is life stages impacting your writing, or like what's going on in your life impacting where you're writing. And I'm going to be using all 3 of these books as examples of, and my upcoming book that I haven't officially announced yet, as examples of this phenomenon in action, so that it's really clear what I'm talking about. And just because I have books, I can talk about them. So basically, when I first got the idea for Mary Ellen Breaking the Curse, I love that I've just put my hand up but it has like cradled the book. When I first got the idea for Mary Ellen Breaking the Curse, very first ever got the idea, I was in 6th form. I was between the ages of 16 and 18. I don't exactly remember, that was a long time ago now. And I was thinking about going to uni, so I made up a story about a university student, Mary, who had to find this MacGuffin artifact thing to break a curse because she was special for unknown reasons. Didn't care at the time to come up with reasons why. I was just like, because I say so, that's why. And she wants to join the Brotherhood of Guardians but can't because it's a brotherhood and they don't allow women. Now this was back in approximately 2011 that I was doing this. So like that was still a big trend back then of like that was like the girl power trend, and I was on that girl power train. And and I don't regret any of it. Like when I came back to it in 2018, it was a book I knew I could finish, and I did finish it. And bearing in mind that 2018, in case you can't maths quickly, or you didn't listen to the fact that it's my 5-year wedding anniversary this year, I was mere months married. My wife had just finished her master's degree. She graduated in 2017, so I was very, very close to university still. I didn't publish the book until 2021 because I wasn't ready, because lots of reasons. But basically, when it got to 2021, I had this finished book. I was feeling the pressure to get something out because I felt like if I didn't do it in 2021, it was never going to happen. That the situation of my life in 2021 was leaning so that I wouldn't be able to call myself an author. I'd have to call myself something else. Because I've been calling myself a writer for 5 years. 5 years? No, that's not true. For 3 years at that point. And I needed to have a book out. I just needed to do it. I'm not going to go into the reasons around it in my life as to why I needed to do it then and there, but it was a situation I needed to get this book out. And seeing as Mary Ellen Breaking the Curse was the only book I had ever finished, I figured that was probably the best choice. So I did that one. When I started on the publishing path for Mary Ellen Breaking the Curse in probably April, May, I started writing the sequel. Intermittently started writing the sequel. I wasn't really serious about, well, not like I wasn't serious about it, like I didn't want to write it, but I wasn't really seriously invested in getting this book written as fast as possible, because my investment was primarily in publishing Mary Ellen Breaking the Curse, and the secondary project that I was doing was writing Mary Ellen Finding the Air. And then I took NaNoWriMo off. I wrote a different story. But I was also doing the thing that made me feel so pressured to get this sorted, and also we got a dog. There was a lot of things going on, and then I really started properly concentrating on writing Mary Ellen Finding the Air in 2022. In July 2022 we moved 7 hours away from where we had lived, which is actually not as impressive as our most recent move, which is 11 hours away from where we lived. 9 months later. There are still boxes littering my office right now. It's a lot. Anyway, so when it comes to writing Mary Ellen Breaking the Curse, I was still very enmeshed for the vast majority of the actual writing process, and not just tidying up a bit, because that's basically what I did in 2021, was tidy up, flesh out and smush down, and just like neaten that story. When I was actually writing it, I was very enmeshed in university. I was thinking about going to uni, or I just cut ties with university. So it was very, very clear in my mind. It was very much like the thing that I was thinking about at the time. Whereas with Mary Ellen Finding the Air, I was writing it in 2021 and 2022. And I had been divorced from university completely, as in none of my friends or family, well, a couple of my friends are doing like PhDs, but that's really not the same. So none of my friends or family were at university at this point, and hadn't been for 4 years. That's a long time. But it worked out. It was fine. It was hard to get through it, but it was fine. But the thing is when I was getting to the end of that, I originally wrote one ending that was not half as close as the actual ending that it's got, where the thing... how to phrase this without spoilers. The thing that needs to happen for these books to close completely, for the series to be over with, is I have to undo the big thing that I did in book 1. I'm not saying which big thing, but if you've read both books, you know what I'm talking about. And if you've read neither of the books, you have no idea. And if you've read book 1, you might be able to gauge, but I don't think it's spoilery enough that you're thinking like, oh, you've ruined my enjoyment, because it's a series plot, not a book plot. Book as in one book or the other book. Anyway, so I have to undo the big thing that I did in book 1. And I realised that I didn't have a book 3 in me. I didn't know what it was going to be. I had no idea what I could possibly do to make book 3 happen. So I undid the thing. But I left it nice and open so that if I do have a book 3, I can write it. It's not so closed that there's no possibility of continuation, side novels or anything like that. It's open enough to be a fun open ending, and it's closed enough that I don't have to go back to it. Because as much as I love the characters and the story, and believe me, I absolutely adore these things, but as much as I love them, I don't necessarily have it in me to have that connection with those characters that needs to happen for a third book. Like, the joy in the writing just isn't there right now for me where I am in my life right now, which is, again, 6 years now divorced from university, and having moved the places I've moved and having done the things I've done, having the ideas that I have now, and the way that my writing has shifted and changed over the years, even just the past 5 years since I started taking this thing really seriously, it all adds. I'm sorry, I've just got this one bit of hair, I keep seeing it in the viewfinder and I'm just like, what are you doing? Thoroughly distracted by it. But so that's what I mean, like, I very much have sort of moved out of the era of my life, the stage of my life, where this is a thing that's easy to write. And I've moved into a different stage of my life where other things are easier to write. Ironically, Welcome to Humanity, which is a very different novel, because those are fantasy and this is sci-fi. Those are, like, quite happy and this is quite devastating. It's fun. And also, it might make you cry. When my wife was recommending it to her mum, because my in-laws read all of my books because they're amazing. My mum also reads all of my books because she's amazing, but my in-laws read all of my books because they're amazing. And when my wife was recommending it to them and talking about it, like, oh my gosh, it's going to be great when this book comes out. I cannot wait for you guys to read it, because my wife gets to read everything before it comes out, obviously. And she was like, you want to buy a big book. You want tissues before you start reading Welcome to Humanity. So my mother-in-law bought the book from Amazon and a box of tissues from Amazon at the same time to be delivered at the same time. So that's going to be fun. I'm waiting for the agonised texts, honestly. Okay, great, cool. So probably no more Guardian Cadet series, because you're not at the life stage anymore, but that doesn't really clarify anything, Will. That just tells me that there's not going to be any more Guardian Cadet books, probably. And that you could finish Welcome to Humanity, finally, which you already talked about in the previous video you made here. Did I actually talk about that? I don't know. Yes, I did. And it's like, yeah, okay. You're absolutely right. And also, you're not absolutely right. I'm not done. No, the next thing that I sort of have here is that the next book I'm bringing out, which I haven't officially announced yet, but so the next book I have coming out, which I haven't really talked about very much yet, sign up to my mailing list if you want to be the first to hear anything, but that book is coming out in October. The preview is in the back of Welcome to Humanity, and also the back of Marilyn Finding the Air, and fun fact, the characters' names keep changing. So, prepare yourself for that, if you've read the previews. But anyway, the point is, the book I'm bringing out in October was one that I wrote in 2020. 2020? Was it? Yeah, gotta be. I reckon it was 2020. It was my lockdown book. That's what I call it. Yeah, it was 2020, because in 2021 I was writing my fake art book, which is nowhere near finished. In 2020 I started writing this sci-fi space opera. That's all I'm giving you. But my sci-fi space opera, then entitled An Untitled Space Opera, is the easiest book I'd ever written. Talked about that in my How Many Works in Progress is Too Many video last year. I am coming out with another one of those this year, so keep your eyes peeled, or, subscribe if you want to stick around and see that. But my sci-fi space opera, as yet untitled space opera, was my lockdown book. It was very much born out of all of those feelings that I got while I was in lockdown with my wife. It was just me and my wife alone in the house for an elongated period of time. And one of the big things that we did was we played a lot of Mass Effect. And then we started making up stories about aliens, because that's what you do when you've been playing a lot of Mass Effect. And my wife got big into, like, baking and botany during that time. I don't think botany is the right word. She did gardening, but we called it Botany Bay. where she had all of her little planters and stuff. I don't know anything about gardening. I don't really like it, but. And then she moved them all outside. It was a whole thing. She really enjoyed it. She wants to do it again. Cool. The point is that that's what we were doing during that time. And we had Botany Bay. We talked a lot about like space botany. We had her making like sourdough bread, as everybody was doing in that time period, really. And we talked about like what it would be like to be a chef on a spaceship. There was just a lot of spaceship talk. A lot of aliens talk, a lot of like, hey, wouldn't it be interesting if, wouldn't it be fun if, wouldn't it be an idea too, wouldn't it be cute if, and like talking about all of these potential situations. And we had already come up many, many years ago with the Interplanetary Alliance. That's not a spoiler either. That's been on my website for a year now. But the Interplanetary Alliance is the guise under which all of these stories are supposed to happen. They're supposed to be called the Interplanetary Alliance novels. They're called the Interplanetary Alliance novels, and the Interplanetary Alliance is the bureaucracy that they're all working with. It's like a low stakes, high stakes novel. Basically, it's a space opera, so there must be stuff going on a higher level in the world. But the vast majority of what you get to see day to day, or what you get to see within the novels, is the day-to-day running of smaller ships in the backdrop of this giant overarching thing that's happening. I love this book, guys. It's glorious. It's a beautiful novel, and I'm really excited for people to get to read it. And I came up with all of these ideas. I came up with 9 book ideas, and I've had more since. And I have not been able to write a single fucking one. Because when I came up with the idea and when I wrote it for NaNoWriMo 2020, my wife was at home with me all the time. And the few times she wasn't, the few times that lockdown lifted enough for her to go back to work, she was working 5 minutes away from the house, and she was working from 8:30 till 4:30. We had a lot of time still to spend together. Now, she's working longer days than she ever has before, for fair pay. Further away than most of the times that we've spent. Like, that she's further away than most of what we've done subsequent to the last time we lived around here. But the point is that I'm not spending half as much time with her anymore. And it's become very difficult to write these books. Bugger. So, I got interrupted by a phone call by said wife. I'm back now. What did I say last? I don't remember. So we're just going to have to smush these together, and I'm sorry if it's abrupt. Anyway, the point is that spending less time with my wife means I have less wife time. No, it means I have less of these ideas, these close quarters kind of ideas, because I'm not spending time close quarters with anyone. I'm spending a lot of time on my own in the house, or rather, me and he's asleep, so I won't call him, but the dog and the cat, and that's it. Those are all the beings I spend my time with. And being in that situation is a very different experience than being in the situation that I was in when I first wrote the first book, which was, again, as I said, close quarters. It was my lockdown book. Close quarters with somebody else for an elongated period of time, and a lot of the tension that comes with that, even when it's people that you, or like a person that you really like, there's always going to be tension if you can't really get away from one another, and you have to be quite good at communicating, or if you're failing at communicating, then that's when the tension kind of snaps. And all of that has been baked into this book in a really cool and exciting way. It sounds bad, but it's not. It's a great and exciting way. And a big part of this first book is literally they are taking... Oh my god, I'm just going to talk about it, aren't I? They're doing their deep space travel license assessment, which basically means they're all on the ship with their assessor, who's looking at everything they do going, that seemed like a good choice for someone to spend at least 2 years in deep space. I'm not sure. That's like the premise of the novel. And it's a lot of fun. Like I said, like that's a lot of fun. And then there's this huge backdrop of space and the Interplanetary Alliance and all of this other stuff going on. And like that is very much the experience of being in lockdown for me with my wife, because it was me and her having fun together in the backdrop of this really dramatic, awful situation. Like, you'd get updates and stuff and you'd be like, oh my gosh, that sounds horrible. Do you want to pretend we're in space? And like, you want to pretend we're in space instead? And like, that's why I haven't been able to write any of the other books, is because we haven't been using those same escape tactics. We haven't been pretending to be in space and telling stories about it recently, because we've been moving house. It's been too stressful. We haven't really been making up stories about anything. She's been out at these long days at work and will be for the foreseeable future, and that means a lot less time spent with her, and with a lot less time spent with her, there's more of that isolation feeling, and it becomes far easier to write stories where characters are feeling isolated in a way that the Interplanetary Alliance novels, the IPA novels, just don't allow for, because the whole point of them is what it's like to live in a close quarters ship, or whatever form of ship, but the point is what it's like to live with these other people, or you're kind of turning into your found family primarily through proximity. And it's a very exciting concept, and I really like it, and that's the whole like thought process for all of these books, is the proximity makes for closeness in a very specific way, and that's a very interesting concept to explore. But if you're not feeling proximus to people, that's not a word, but if you're not feeling like that close proximity to other people, you don't necessarily get that vibe, and it becomes much harder to write these books. And I'm not saying I'm not writing them, they're just going slower than I wanted them to. Meanwhile, other things are going far faster, and these are the things that are more, well, isolation based. So basically what I mean by that is, like, I've got a year and a half's worth of publishing plans right now. Provided I can scrounge together the money to buy more ISBNs, I have a year and a half's worth of publication plans. I have October planned, I have March next year planned, and I have October planned, I have April next year planned, and I have September, October next year planned as well. 2024 is not an IPA year. 2024 is a year of something else. I've finished those books now. I'm getting feedback on them. They're honestly are very likely to be minimal edits. I've built designs for my covers. It's all pretty much ready to go, as long as the feedback isn't, this is shit, what are you doing? As long as the feedback is like, yeah, throw in a little bit more description here, and you know, all of the stuff that I get as standard for feedback. This needs more description, when is this happening, this is great, this is confusing. It's honestly pretty much ready to go, and it definitely will be a year from now, or just under a year from now. And that's great, and I am having so much fun with it. And I was thinking to myself, okay, that gives me a year of leeway, right? Which is great, because it allows me to try and build this IPA novel, this next IPA novel, whatever one I decide to do next. It gives me a year to build it. Camera battery's gonna die. Oh. So I have like a year and a half to get this all sorted. Great, because it took me a year and a half to write the sequel to Mary Ellen Breaking the Curse, right? But the thing is it's not going smoothly. Like, I have been getting closer, incrementally closer. But the other half of the trouble is that I feel like I'm just whining about this now. I'm not. This is all to the point of the video, I swear. But the trouble I'm having, not the trouble, some of the trouble I'm having is that because it's going so incrementally slowly, my ever speedy brain is like, we could do something else and it would go much faster than this. Let's do one of these other stories. Let's focus. And that's what got me thinking about this whole thing in the first place, was if I were to go via mood, what would that look like? And then what would that lead me to? And the answer to that question is chaos. Because I would constantly be starting new novels and potentially never finishing any, for a start. And for a second, I would probably end up doing the thing where I would, even if I did finish, I'd finish a lot of firsts, because a first novel in a series is much more exciting than a second novel in a series, and far easier as well. because you can just make shit up. Like, the second novel in the series, or any subsequent novel in a series, must adhere to the rules set out in the novel before it. That's not true for a first novel. For a first novel, you could do anything you want. It's so enticing, because you can just make shit up. You've got a problem, you don't have to go looking in the previous book for what the solution was last time. You just make shit up, and it works. It's my favourite thing about new novels. Just make shit up. But the trouble is that opening a lot of series that you never continue is kind of a dick move to people who are reading your books. Like, it is, isn't it? It's a dick move. Like, that would be so mean. I am also a reader, like, as most writers are, I am also a reader, and I would hate that from an author, so I'm not going to do that. That would be a dick move. And also, I'm so tempted by it, because I am at a stage in my life right now where one of my other books that's on the horizon, which again I will be talking about in a video coming later that I already filmed, but one of the things is that I have this other idea, this urban fantasy idea, that's very much about that feeling of isolation. And the feeling that you can't really reach out to anybody because everybody's just, like, not physically out of reach necessarily, but there's always this barrier between the main character and everyone around them. And there's this really interesting dynamic involved in that, and it's like, it's a whole huge ass potential series. This is another one of those ones where you're looking at it going, gosh, Will, that's a lot of planned books. And it's like, it is a lot of... Hold, please. This is it so far. Yeah, this. Do you remember this notebook from one of my previous videos from this year? Not that many, you can find it yourself. Currently, I have planned out by planned out, I mean 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 lines of planning. Maximum. Perfect. So 1, 2, 3. Nope, those are just people. Hang on, hold up. There we go. Yeah, maximum of 4 lines. That's not even true. Maximum of 3 lines of handwritten text, which is book 1, book 2, book 3, book 4, book 5, book 6, book 7, and book 8. There are potentially 8 books in this series. And I want to write them. But I know with that, I feel like, because it's a continuing series, much like Marielle and Breaking the Curse of Fun, the Guardian Cadet series, why do I always do that? Much like the Guardian Cadet series, this urban fantasy series that I have the plan for, this paranormal urban fantasy thing that I have the plan for, is a follow-on series. Each book comes immediately after the events of the previous book, and the events of the previous book have a huge impact on the events of the next book. So that feels like it needs to be written in one long manic stint. I think the plan with that series is actually just to, this is going to be a nightmare to do, and I really could have done with a little more time. Like, this 1.5 years would have been the perfect time to just out this whole thing. Like, spending a whole 1.5 years just getting through a whole thing, and then spending like 6 months tidying up each piece would have been great. But I've already opened the IPA series, so I have to finish that too. And with the IPA series, it's not necessarily a follow-on series. There are pieces of it that follow on from itself, like you might follow a ship for more than one book. You will follow at least one ship for more than one book. But there are also what would be classed as a companion novel, where it's like you kind of meet some people in one of the books, and then in another book you spend a lot of time with them, and there's these pieces of crossover that primarily happen entirely so that you can be there like, oh look, it's my friends from this book. Like, their stories aren't really interwoven. It's the overarching series storyline, the like opera storyline, that is the thing that matters. So like, if I could use, Rent is based on the opera La Boheme, so I'm going to use Rent as an example of like what I mean by space opera, like in this context, and I think this is probably the best explanation I have for a space opera, which if you already know what a space opera is, you're probably there like, would you just carry on, Will? Get to the end of the point. But basically what happens with Rent is you have this really focused and fixated stint in these people's lives to the backdrop of a massive thing going on. So the backdrop of Rent is the AIDS crisis and all of the fallout of that. So incredibly conservative government and hate rhetoric being spread virulently, and yeah, it's still relevant today. But the thing of that is that Rent doesn't really deal with any of those things. Like, those things impact the characters. The characters aren't really trying to change anything, and some people use this as an example of why Rent's a bad musical, because they're not really talking about the AIDS crisis like it's something that needs to be fixed. They're just living in the backdrop of it. But honestly, that's what an opera does. That's what a space opera is. It's mostly people just living in the backdrop of a big thing happening over their heads that they can't really necessarily impact. They're just trying to make it work. Trying to make life work in this backdrop. And yeah, and like, that's the whole thing with the IPA series. The IPA novels is that they all exist in this universe with this IPA ruling, with this IPA backdrop, but there are just a lot of people living lives and a lot of different ships that you get to follow doing that. It's a lot of fun. It's going to be great. But it doesn't match as a follow-on series where the thing that happens in the next book is subsequent to what happened in the previous book. I'm going to plot out the chronology for people on my website because I know people like that. But at the moment, it's literally just what takes my fancy comes next. And that's okay, because it doesn't really matter if you read them in order unless it's a follow-on series. Unlike with this urban fantasy thing where it really matters that you read it in order, because otherwise you're going to get spoilers for the previous book. Much like with Mary Ellen Breaking the Curse and Mary Ellen Finding the Air. If you read Mary Ellen Finding the Air first, you're going to get a lot of spoilers for what happens in Mary Ellen Breaking the Curse. So when you get to like chapter 5 of Mary Ellen Breaking the Curse, you're going to be like, yeah, we all knew that. But you didn't if you read it in the right order. And it is important to me and the way I write to try and get through chronological and follow-on series in one big blast so that I still have a very strong memory of what happened in the previous book without constantly having to go back and check. And I will read the previous book before I write the next book, but also it's kind of a nightmare. Because then I remember like, oh, I remember putting this thing in the previous book, but I don't remember where it was or whether it stayed. Which is kind of a pain. Which is why I really want to be able to blurg out this entire this entire urban fantasy series in one long sitting and then break it up into the chunks that make the actual individual novels, because I know exactly what plot what plot things happen to end each of these stories or like to make the climax of each of these stories. So it's gonna write like a wave, but it's gonna read like a series. Because it's a series and it will be broken up, and I just think it'll work better that way. So it would have been really nice to be able to do it during this year and a half I have of like publishing planned, books written. I have the space to do it, except for the fact that again I need to have another IPA novel, because I can't spend a year and a half writing my urban fantasy series and then end up doing the thing that would be absolutely the dick move, which is publishing book 1 in a series, then publishing an entire separate series, it's a duology, an entire separate series the next year, and then starting another series, and then I'm stuck with these 2 open series. What am I going to do? Alternate? Maybe, that could work, but I don't think it's a wise plan. I think it would be very annoying. And I'm not saying I'm going to finish the IPA series before I get to this urban fantasy thing, necessarily. But I'm also not saying I'm not going to do that. Like, I don't know yet, because so much of this depends on where I am, what stage of life I'm in, whether we're going to move house, whether we're going to stay here, if my wife gets a new job, if we get a new pet, if I get a new laptop even, like this. I'm still working on the one that I got from the DSA in 2014. Like, she's old, guys. My video camera similarly aged, like... Are you doing badly financially? Well, I had to buy business insurance today. That was expensive. But actually, while we're here, I'm going to buy Pride in September. That that's the end of the video. That's like such an abrupt cut off, but the stage of life you're in really impacts, for me, really impacts what I'm writing and what connections I feel with my characters. Right now, I'm in a period of my life where I feel quite isolated, and it feels much easier to write isolating narratives, or narratives about isolation. You'll never guess what's coming in 2024. It's a book about being isolated, or about feeling isolated. But it's also a book that I've been writing for a really, really long time, and I think I talk about this in my works in progress video that's coming out in a couple of weeks, but one of the big things is that a lot of the books that I'm bringing out at the minute, like ignoring Mary Ellen Finding the Air for a sec, because that is a sequel to a book, but that one took me, well, technically, first incarnation of Mary Ellen Breaking the Curse was way back when I was a teenager, but if we're just taking the 2018 restart, that book took me 2018, 2019, 2020, 2021, 3 years. Welcome to Humanity, 5 years. The books that are coming out in 2024, 5 years. To get to the publishing point. My first IPA novel I started in 2020, and it's going to be released in 2023. So again, 3 years before it got published. And like, I'm running out of backlist. Like, I have the Fae Court novel still that's on my backlist, and that's it for partially written manuscripts. The quickest book I ever wrote was technically this sci-fi one, but the quickest book I ever wrote and published, the fastest turnaround from ideation to publication, was Mary Ellen Finding the Air, and that took me 2 years from ideation to publication. So I'm a little bit worried about how long these things are going to take me. What was I saying before that? Oh yeah, I was saying, in happier news and exciting stuff, if you happen to be in the UK for the, what's it freaking called? On a happier note, if you happen to be in the UK during September, or rather on the 1st of September, you can get free tickets to an event called By Pride, which I will be exhibiting. My gosh. On a happier note, and to conclude this video, if you happen to be in the UK or can get to the UK on the 1st of September, I will be in London at an event called By Pride. Tickets are free. I have to pay to exhibit there, but tickets are free. I will be selling my books there, signed copies of my books, including this space opera sci-fi novel that's coming out. It's coming out in October, unless you're at By Pride, in which case you can literally buy it before anybody else other than my feedback readers has even all but glanced at it. I might not have even revealed the cover to the public by that point. It's all still a little bit up in the air, I'm not sure yet. But I'll also be selling these books, or if you already have my books, you can bring them with you to By Pride and I will sign them for you, and you can buy this little like bumper pack that I'm doing for By Pride, which is like all of the other stuff that you get. Hang on, hold up. Bumper pack of some of the other stuff that you would get if you bought it from me and my online bookstore, but you couldn't because of shipping. You can bring me books to sign and you can buy these little bumper packs if you want to, if you happen to be in London, or can be in London, on the 1st of September and get your free tickets to By Pride. I will let you know more details as I have them, but right now all that's happened so far is I've signed the contract and I'm waiting for an invoice. And I got some insurance, so you can't sue me for if you fall over or get a paper cut or something. I do not give official advice. Do not think you can replicate. All those disclaimers now have to happen as well. Although they really should have been happening from the get-go. Anyway, the point is that I will be there if you want to come and say hello. Even if you don't want to bring books, or you only do like ebooks, and you don't want any extras, although I do sell stickers also. But I will be there if you want to come say hi and hang out. I will be taking someone very special who doesn't show her face on social media. We all know who it is. It's not the cat. There's only one she that lives with me that isn't a cat, So I think we know. I'll be taking her with me. She's a volunteer. She doesn't get paid for this shit. She carries heavy things for me. And yeah, I really hope that if you are around, you'll come see me. And that if you hadn't heard of it before, you'd be interested in coming. And like, obviously I know some of you are not in the UK, and like flights would be probably more prohibitively expensive than the shipping costs. If you can't come to Buy Pride and you still want to buy my signed copies of my books, or possibly pester me for potentially sending out these bumper packs, which should only cost as much as a small letter, which is far, far cheaper to post than a package. All the links that you need are in the description box below, along with a link to my Coffee account if you feel like supporting the channel, and a link to my mailing list if you want to hear about everything first, except apparently Buy Pride, which I am announcing. Well, I announced it on Tumblr. Now I'm announcing it here. And my mailing list isn't going to hear about it until the end of the month, but they will be getting sneak previews for the book I'm releasing before Buy Pride. The book I'm releasing in October and also at Buy Pride. So, you know, there's that. That's all in the description box below, right next to the like and subscribe buttons if you do feel like sticking around to hear about my about my chaotic works in progress video. And what's coming next from me, not just in October, but all the way into 2024. Although again, if you buy a copy of what's coming out in October, you will find out what's coming in 2024, because there's a preview for that in the back of the book. Did think about doing a preview for the next of the IPA novels, but A, I haven't got far enough to reliably be able to put that in there yet, and B, I like doing what book's coming next. I know that didn't happen with Mary Ellen Finding the Air, because I didn't know I was going to be able to finish Welcome to Humanity, and I didn't want to put that in and then be there like, actually I'm not doing it. Or rather, I didn't know I was going to be able to finish Welcome to Humanity, and I published it in a very chaotic style. Do I recommend publishing a book as you know you're going to be moving house? No. Would I do it again? Yeah, probably, in a heartbeat. I am chaos incarnate and cannot be trusted. So, I'll see you in 2 weeks' time with more info about everything. I don't know what my video is going to be. Might be the works in progress one, might be a different video. Who even knows? Happy Disability Pride Month, and I'll see you in 2 weeks' time with whatever, and hopefully I might see you at Buy Pride. Bye. Unintended pun.